of the plague, there are 81,491 dead Americans, 1.38 million cases. Worldwide, at least 4.18 million and 286,000 deaths, but we don't really know what to compare. I wish journalists listening right now stop saying America leads the world. We have no idea what's going on in China. They lie. We have no idea what's going on in Iran. They lie. We have no idea of what's going on in places like Ecuador because they don't have the ability to count. And so just stop with that. All we know is what the Western Europe and the American numbers are. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Politico. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Hugh. How are you?
Good. I want to talk about phase four, but first I want to talk to you about Obamagate. Yesterday, Philip Drucker, your friend and mine, asked the president a question. This is what happened, cut number 16.
Phil?
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
So, Jake Sherman, I know what Obamagate is. I'm curious whether you have a definition of it.
Well, I hate to. I think we might disagree here, Hugh. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I assume what he's talking about is what he sees as the Obama administration's complicitness, again, in his view of what he would call spying against his campaign and setting up his campaign and people in his orbit. That would be what I would assume he's talking about. But I guess it would be helpful if he would say what he believes it is and whether he believes someone should be prosecuted.
Well, I think it is the intentional interference with the peaceful, seamless, cooperative transfer of power between presidential administrations. Now, that interference may or may not be criminal. Bill Barr, in his interview with CBS, said, we won't know for a while if it's criminal. But it was certainly destructive of the Republic's greatest political tradition. It's not been seen in any serious fashion since 1861. And I must tell you, when I read the Sally Yates interview with the special counsel, where she was in the January 5 meeting with President Obama and had no idea that Comey had sent the Bureau's people over to trap Flynn, at that point, Jake Sherman, the scales have got to come off of everybody's eyes. It's the Sally Yates statement that just says, what? They didn't tell the Department of Justice they were interviewing Flynn, and she was herself self-described flabbergasted. That's what Obamagate is.
Well, I will say that in my experience, usually higher ups at the Justice Department know of things like that, and I only know that because I've dealt with criminal investigations of members of Congress in the past, where the senior leadership of the Department of Justice generally does know when a member of Congress is being interviewed or being about to be indicted. I knew that in the case of Aaron Schock, that Eric Holder at the time, I believe, was aware of those interviews in that process. So I will say, just on that narrow point, it does seem that the senior leadership of the Department of Justice generally does know about something of that nature.
Yeah, Comey and Strzok and the gang and McCabe ran an end run around the DOJ in order to get Flynn. And Andy McCarthy's view is it's to remove Flynn because Flynn would have figured out the dicey stuff they had been doing through the fall, and it certainly did impact the administration. That's Obamagate. So I don't think there's any doubt that people know what Obamagate is. Now, the next question is, why ask? I mean, what is going on with the press corps in the Rose Garden, Jake? Yesterday, John Roberts asked a very important question about the new manifestation of the virus among children, although there are only 85 cases. Every parent I know's eyebrow went up when they hear about that. That's very scary. But we get all these questions, which are, to me, gotcha questions. What is wrong with the press corps?
Like what, for example?
The end question. Well, what does Obamagate is the first one, but then let's go to
Well,
cut number.
that's not a. I don't think that's a gotcha question. I think that's a totally fair question. The president chose to talk about that. He sent something like, I don't know. He sent a number of tweets on that. So it's not crazy. It's not unusual to ask a question about something the president has chose to talk about. We didn't make the president talk about that. He decided
It wasn't
to
the
talk about
original
that.
question. It was the follow-up. And the president said, you know what it is. And Philip Rucker did not respond. He said, what is it again? And that's where I thought he was being contentious. But I'll give you another one. This is Weijie Zhang at the end of the question, cut number 13.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Okay, stop
Well,
for a
they're
second.
losing.
So, Jake, why is this a global competition to you? Is that a good, legitimate question in your view?
Well, I mean, the larger question to me would be, why is this? I mean, we're not leading the world in testing.
No, but she said that why is this? Her question is, why is this a global competition? Is that legit?
I don't. It wouldn't be the question that I would ask. That doesn't mean.
No, of course not. It's it's a stupid question. He's never said it's a global competition. He is using the metrics that everybody else uses, and they're bad metrics because we don't know what's going on in China and Iran, but she's out to get his dander, and he ended up closing off the press conference. I just think, you got the John Carls and the John Roberts and the Steve Hollands who are there doing their business, doing a good job, and then you got a bunch of people who are there to get the president's dander up and cause a scene and make themselves some money. And I think the whole country's tuned into it. Now, Jake, tell me about where are we on the Hill? Is there going to be a phase 4 in May?
Yeah, I think that there is going to be a phase 4. I don't think it's going to be in May. The White House, according to my reporting, sees between 6 and 8 weeks from now another stimulus package. They're under internal pressure, and they want to see how the money they've laid out already works and how it's working, and if it's effective. The Democrats, of course, are going to put out their bill in the next couple days here, and they're going to do a large stimulus bill that's mostly a member management slash a messaging document, as John Cornyn or John Thune put it yesterday, although I believe they would both agree with that.
Oh, I missed that.
Statement. Yeah, so I think that I do think there'll be another stimulus of some sort. I don't believe it'll be anytime soon.
As I look at it, the states desperately in need of money. So the Democrats and they're mostly blue states. There are some red states that need it, but I mean, Illinois had to borrow $12 billion from the Treasury, and California $900 million, and Connecticut $1.1 billion, and that's just the first week. So they're going to have to bail out the states. The Republicans will get tort reform. I think they'll get protection for state businesses and employers from COVID cases, and I also think they'll get defense spending. What do the Republicans want out of this, Jake Sherman?
Well, that's the number one thing they want is some liability protections, which I think is going to be a tough sell for a lot of them. They're also going to want to wall off the money that they give to states. They're going to want to wall it off from this general revenue replacement, which is what Democrats have wanted to do. They're going to want to make sure that it's COVID-related, that the states are spending on COVID-related funding, and I think that's the prerogative of a lot of Republicans.
Why do you think it's a big lift to get tort reform?
I just think the Democrats are going to resist that, and they've already signaled that they're going to resist it. Chuck Schumer signaled he's going to resist it. I don't know. You never know how these things shake out, right? You never know how these negotiations shake out and who gets what and where things end up. I just think that they're going to need a lot to give that up, and I think that Chuck Schumer has already said you're asking, or I'm not sure if it's Chuck Schumer, but one Democratic leader has already said you're going to put people at risk, and you're going to want to protect the employers who put them at risk. And I think that that's going to be a tough row for a lot of Democrats.
If they don't give on that, there's not going to be a phase 4. The Republican Party will rise up and smote down every Republican if they do not get tort reform. They might not get phase 4. They'll accept that the Democrats weren't willing to give it. But if they cave on that, they're done. They'll lose the Senate. They'll lose the House. If they allow the plaintiffs' bar to pick over the bones of Americans' business after the Chinese poisoned us, the Chinese Communist Party poisoned us, that'll be it. And so I just think you can put it in playbook. There ain't going to be a deal without tort reform. Not going to happen. Jake Sherman, always a pleasure. Follow him at Politico. Get the Politico Playbook in the morning and come with me back on second segment here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. 22 minutes after the hour, 50 years ago. I'm doing my 50th anniversary music today. 50 years ago, Woodstock was on the top of the charts. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I got to tell you, if you don't know what Obamagate is, you're pretending. You're not really leveling with people. Everybody knows what Obamagate is. Obamagate was interference at any number of levels by a handful of rogue FBI officials, maybe some people in the intelligence community, maybe some Obama aides. There is that January 5th meeting at the White House, in order to screw up Donald Trump's presidency, to cripple it, to ensnare him in a special counsel. James Comey led it. Sally Yates was cut out. All you have to do is read Exhibit 4 to the Department of Justice filing, and you'll see that not only was she flabbergasted to learn that they were interviewing Flynn, she hit the roof, according to her declaration to the special counsel's team. Page 5 of 12 of that on Exhibit 4, by the way. You ought to read the exhibit sometime. She also was in the Oval Office when they were talking about the Flynn eavesdropping and the characterization of his talks with the Russian ambassador, and she didn't have any idea what was going on. No one had briefed her. It was just an end run. It was an attempt to destroy the Trump presidency before it got started, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows what Obamagate is. Obamagate is the attempt to interfere with the peaceful transition of power and destroy an administration before it gets started. That's Obamagate. That's Obamagate, and everybody knows what Obamagate is. Do you know that you need to be diversified? Time to tell you about my sponsor, Birch Gold, because more and more of you are figuring out that the markets are just bizarre and that the price of gold is the one solid, absolute, rock-solid, fixed thing that you can look to every morning, and you can find out all about gold by texting my name, Hugh, to 474747. Yesterday, of course, was mixed market day. The Dow was down 100 points. The NASDAQ was up 71, and the S&P was up a half a point. And gold this morning is at 1709, which is not pretty high for gold, but it's not the 2000 where I stopped saying you've got to diversify as much as I think you ought to diversify. I think you ought to have at least 10% of your portfolio or your net wealth, your whole being. If you are worth $100,000, you ought to have $10,000 in gold. And put it in a safety deposit box, have it in your retirement account. Birch Gold, if you go to hughgold.com, will help you with any of those things, whether you want to roll over part of your portfolio in your 401, your retirement plan, into a physical metal-backed IRA, 401k. Birch Gold will do that for you, but you've got to text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. And overseas, Japan didn't do anything. Hong Kong was down 1.5 points. Who cares? We don't know what's going on in China. And England is up well over 0.5% this morning. Germany doesn't know what's going on. So it's going to be impossible to say. But the 10-year in America is now up to 0.73, crawling its way back to a normal market, which is good news. Get your gold. Get diversified. Also, if you're going to get some masks, go through givingmasks.com, because you're going to get the mask. Everyone's going to be wearing masks for a long time. In restaurants, in bars, at meetings, around work. When you go out in public, when you go to church, you're going to be wearing a mask. So we're going to get your mask. Go to givingmasks.com. They are European certified surgical masks. They have the third-party team auditing factory quality. And what's great about givingmasks.com is when you add /Hugh, H-U-G-H, for every order that you get, they'll give the similar order to Children's Hospital of Orange County. Isn't that great? Now, there's a story. It's givingmasks.com/Hugh. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal. Nonprofits face a bleak future as revenue dries up amid coronavirus. It's true. 501c3s are dying out there, but not Angel Tree, which takes care of the children of prisoners. Thank you to this audience. Hundreds of you are stepping up with $200 contributions to send a kid to the camps that are open. There are a few that are open. And if they're not open, to make sure that that child receives a box of blessings, $150 in food coupons, sports equipment, a note from mom or dad who is behind bars, an age-appropriate Bible, a little bit of the sports equipment is the key stuff. Some hoops, a soccer ball, get outside. But we need you to go to HughHewitt.com, find the Angel Tree banner, and join the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I in sponsoring one or more children who've got mom or dad in jail. There is no more deserving kid in America than an innocent who's without mom or dad. That's the Angel Tree banner at HughHewitt.com.
Hugh.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I actually don't know how Neil Diamond had like 1 million #1 songs, including this one, Shiloh. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But he was a heck of a performer, and I hope he's doing well. Some of you have asked, what am I wearing on my hand? I didn't take my circle ring off this morning. That is the wedding band from the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt that we are hitting 39 years this summer, and that's great. But this is the circle ring, CRUCUL ring. And you can get it at Body Metrics, BODI Metrics, bodymetrics.com. And they're showing up in every hospital in America. They can't make them fast enough. Why? It measures your oxygen level, your SpO2. It's an oximetric measurement device. I think I got that right. How much oxygen, blood oxygen do you have? It also does the pulse and all that kind of stuff and how well you're sleeping and do you have sleep apnea, which I don't. But it just tells you, no, it's not a diagnostic tool, it's an observational tool. And it does a report after you wake up in the morning. I forgot to take it off this morning after I woke up. So I wore it to the studio. I'm not going to leave it around here and forget it here. So I'll take it back and recharge it. But it gives you a report on, how long did you sleep, what were your oxygen levels, et cetera. And the reasons you see it around hospitals, and it costs $300. It's not cheap. I didn't get 10% off. I use my name at Body Metrics. It's that if your oxygen levels are dropping, you don't know it until it's too late. And that's like it's not diagnostic, it's observational. You don't know if it can't tell you if it has COVID. You can't know that. But if your oxygen level is derivating from the mean, let's say you're at a normally 92% oxygen level and all of a sudden you're down at 80, something's wrong. And you might want to call your doctor, like immediately, stat. So that's why Body Metrics, they can't keep them in stock. And it costs $300. It takes a while to figure it out. I've learned how to do it, given that I'm a sort of a physicist without the degree. And so if I can work it, you can work it. That's a joke. Yesterday, John Roberts did us all a favor. John Roberts of Fox asked a question that I think everybody in the country who is a parent or a grandparent wanted asked after they read the Washington Post this weekend and the New York Times yesterday. Now, mind you, listen to the numbers. This is not an alarm. It's, again, an alert. Here's John Roberts talking to the President and Admiral Giroir.
Mr. President, up until now, it's thought that the most vulnerable people were those above the age of 60 or 70 or 80, and the children were pretty much, I don't want to say immune from this, but weren't affected by it. But all day long in the news today, we have been hearing and seeing this terrible syndrome that some 85 children have now. 3 of them have died. What is the task force talking about in terms of that, and what could be done about it?
We're seeing that all over the world now with young children. Very, very tiny percentage, but it's the swelling and the skin rash. And we're looking at that very closely, John. It's a phenomena that's just been brought to everyone's attention a couple of weeks ago. Admiral, you may have something to say about that.
So thank you for pointing that out. And again, I've said many times I'm a pediatrician and a pediatric ICU doctor. This syndrome, which we call or similar to Kawasaki syndrome, it has been seen in a novel coronavirus before, and it's associated with illnesses. So we have a very strong activation on this. We do know treatments for this, but the CDC is interacting actively with the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit network to create case definitions and to understand how this is going and if there are predispositions. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, I spoke to Dr. Gary Gibbons, who directs that, who is advancing many research projects based on that. The ASPR, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, has a team out in several areas looking at if there are any special treatments. We know what the basic treatment is, but this is a little bit different than we normally see. So there really is an activation among all the branches within HHS, working with networks at children's hospitals and ICU nets. It is a small percentage, but it is quite frightening. And this reflects the fact that this virus affects the vasculature. We see clotting, we see strokes. And this is a vasculature phenomenon of inflammation we see in children.
President, with this newly emerging syndrome now among young children, what do you say to parents
who would like to get their children back to school, but are now looking at this and potentially afraid to do that?
Well, again, it's a tiny percentage, but you're right. So we're looking into it very strongly. And the Admiral, as he said, he's known about this for long before this happened. But it is a very, very small percentage. And people recover from that. The children recover from that. Right?
Yes, sir. Most do recover from this, but it is a serious and it can be a fatal condition. So we do want to make sure that parents understand that high fevers, red rashes, particularly in your child, you may need to contact your healthcare provider. There are treatments for this. They work very effectively if gotten early, at least for the vast majority of the cases.
So you see, I think that is the perfect question. John Roberts with the perfect follow-up, the perfect question. The president is aware of it. The president throws it to the Admiral. The Admiral explains, we've activated all the pediatric ICUs in the country. They're aware of it. It's high fever plus rash. There have been 3 deaths, 85. The president emphasizes it's a very small problem, but we're aware of it. Useful stuff. Very, very useful. Contrast that with Philip Rucker talking with Donald Trump, cut number 16.
Phil?
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
You see, the crime is the interference with the peaceful transition of power. I am looking at the Federal Bureau of Investigation report of the conversation, the interview at the special counsel's office spaces in Washington, D.C. Sally Yates was accompanied by her personal counsel, David O'Neill, from Debevoise Plimpton. And they black out the names of the special agents involved, but Andrew Goldstein and Elizabeth Preliker are there. After being advised of the identities of the interviewing team and the purpose of the interview, Yates provided the following information. Yates first learned of the December 2016 calls between Lieutenant General Flynn and the Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak, on January 5, 2017, while in the Oval Office. Yates, along with then FBI Director James Comey, then CIA Director John Brennan, and then Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, were at the White House to brief members of the Obama administration on the classified intelligence community assessment on Russian activities in recent U.S. election. President Obama was joined by his national security advisor, Susan Rice, and others from the National Security Council. After the briefing, Obama dismissed the group but asked Yates and Comey to stay behind. Obama started by saying he had learned of the information about Flynn in his conversation with Kislyak about sanctions. Obama specified he did not want additional information on the matter. Cut out. But was seeking information on whether the White House should be treating Flynn any differently given the information. At that moment, Yates had no idea what the president was talking about, but figured it out based on the conversation. Yates recalled Comey mentioning the Logan Act, but can't recall if he specified if there was an investigation. Comey did not talk about prosecution in the meeting. It was not clear to Yates from where the president first received the information. Yates did not recall Comey's response to the president's questions about how to treat Flynn. She was so surprised by the information she was hearing that she was having a hard time processing it and listening to the conversation at the same time. So the Department of Justice, of which she is the head, is blindsided by the CIA and the FBI. Remember, the FBI works for the DOJ. And the DNI doesn't work for the DOJ, but Clapper, Brennan, and Comey know what's going on, but not Sad Sack Sap Sally Yates. Then, for the next 2 weeks, they go back and forth about whether or not they need to tell the incoming president and his national security team that they think there's a problem. And the FBI resists and resists and resists and resists, and they come up with different reasons not to tell anybody. And Yates says, we ought to tell someone. Yates is really a sad sack in this thing. We ought to tell someone. We ought to tell someone. Yates was frustrated with Comey, page 5 of the 12. Yates did not get any clear answers. She didn't know anything. And then finally she said, we've got to tell the White House. And on the morning of January 26th, she called Don McGahn to tell him about a sensitive matter because the day before, Comey had told her that his agents were interviewing Flynn and did not know. She didn't know it. They totally ran. That's Obamagate. And what the President 44 had to do with undermining President 45, we don't know. But that's Obamagate. And everybody knows it's about destroying the transition. Everybody knows it's about setting up Flynn and crippling the president and getting, and as Liz Cheney said on this show yesterday, James Comey is the baddest actor in town. He's at the heart of this. I don't know what Brennan's role is. I don't know what Clapper's role is. There's some issues about whether or not DNI Clapper, who spent a long time on this show talking about his memoir, I wanted to think he was a good guy, but this is just very, very disturbing. We do not do this in America. We do not plant landmines for a new administration. We do not do perjury traps for incoming national security advisors. And there is speculation they did it because they had so badly broken the law that they had to blow up everything in order to cover their tracks. We'll find out eventually. Durham's out there working. But Barr says, and I trust the Attorney General, don't jump to a conclusion. We don't know if any crimes were committed. There are crimes and there are capital C crimes. I mean, what Dwayne does to me every day is a crime. What the officials did to the Browns last year is a crime, but it's not a federal statute that they violate. So there are crimes and crimes. We'll find out what kind of a crime this is, but it's definitely a little C crime. It'd be a crime, for example, if I didn't tell you about ReliefFactor.com. There it is. I was out running this morning, yesterday. Not running. I was not even trundling. I was doing my my warm down and passed a neighbor. I had my scarf on too, and the neighbor still spotted me. Said, "Hey, I listen to you every morning. Way to go! You're out trundling." I laughed. That's a real listener when they know I've been trundling. And I'll tell you what, it was a beautiful cold day in Northern Virginia. I carry in Kirkland resveratrol omega. I take it every morning at this hour so you can hear me take it. And did 8 miles yesterday. Didn't set any land speed records yesterday because it was such a beautiful day. And I talked to my buddy at the Washington Speakers Bureau for a good hour, talking to Harry for a good hour about this and that. He's down in Florida, trapped in Florida. And so I slowed down. But I feel great because of ReliefFactor.com. You ought to get with the program, ReliefFactor.com. Drucker is next, America. Maybe he'll know what Obamagate is. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That music means Drucker is with us. David M. Drucker. You can follow him on Twitter, read him in the Washington Examiner, see him on TV often. David, Philip Rucker asked the president yesterday, what is this Obamagate of which you speak? I instantly knew what Obamagate is. I know the moment the president tweeted about it. How would you define it?
Well, look, it appears that some people think that the high-level Obama administration officials might have been involved in railroading Flynn and meddling in the transition between the Obama and Trump administrations. I have not done enough reading yet or investigating of my own to know how viable the theory is, but I've seen people that are credible talk about it, and so that's what I would assume it is. And I would imagine if you want to get Trump to talk about it and see what he thinks, you might ask a blind question, raising the turn to see if he's got a lot to say about it. But, I think probably at this point people understand that that's what you're referring to, whether or not you want to agree with the theory or not.
Exactly. And so when Philip, and I've known Philip Rucker a long time, when he said, what is Obamagate? That wasn't, in my view, a good way to ask a question. You would say, Mr. President, you referred to Obamagate. We all know that means the attempt to sabotage the transition, the peaceful transition of power. Do you really believe it was widespread? That's a very innocent question. It's a normal way to answer it. And I think the president would say, look at the Sally Yates declaration. The Sally Yates interview attached as Exhibit 4 to the DOJ filing. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that yet. That's the most explosive document I've read in a long time, Drucker. Have you read that yet?
No, I haven't read it.
In it, she professes she has no idea what's going on in the January 5 Oval Office meeting. She fights with Comey for 2 weeks about whether or not to notify the White House about Flynn. And then she hits the roof when she finds out Comey had sent agents in to interview Flynn without her permission, which is a total perversion of the DOJ pyramid of hierarchy. And I just think that's what the president is smoking about. Barr, of course, said, we don't know if there's any crimes yet. That's what he told CBS. But I know what he's talking about. I just don't get the White House media. I just don't. You cover Congress. Tell me what's going to happen on these negotiations.
Well, I don't know that much is going to happen on these negotiations. Republicans are not in a hurry. They're concerned about the debt. I think the House Democrats are going to have a much different idea of what needs to be done next. And the president's going back and forth, as per usual. 1 minute, when we started this process about 3 weeks ago, talking about this, the president talked about being interested in the big infrastructure bill, things to get the economy churning, maybe different than just rescue money, but also rescue money. Now the White House is saying they're putting on the brakes, and they're sort of more in line with Senate Republicans. So we'll see. But I don't think anybody actually knows because it's not really clear what the president wants, and therefore we don't really know if there's tension between Senate Republicans and the president or not.
I know one thing. I know that there isn't going to be a phase 4 unless there is liability reform. And that's because I've talked to enough business people out there. They're crushed. The restaurant business will never recover if they cannot be protected from claims of negligence related to COVID. And so if the Democrats aren't going to do that, they might as well just walk away and the states are going to go BK, whether they do so formally or not, because, Illinois already borrowed $12 billion from the Treasury to pay unemployment claims. And I just heard Jake Sherman say that's a non-starter for Democrats. That means there's not going to be a deal because that is the sine non qua. There, I'm throwing a little Latin at you, David. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Well, I think that's one way to look at it. I think the other way to look at it is just the sheer amount of money Democrats want to spend, right? So, if Senate Republicans were willing to embrace the kind of spending in the next round that Democrats are interested in, would Democrats embrace liability protections? Now, it's not the kind of thing Democrats like to do, but I think Republicans have a lot of concerns here. Whether people want to agree with them or not, I just think the two sides are on such different pages. And, there's also doesn't seem to be anybody that both sides trust to try and mediate this and bring them both together.
All right, I want to close with the campaign. I have a new Washington Post column up. It's already garnered 2,500 comments. It's about the debates and the difference between Trump and Biden. But in reading through the comments, they're all, they just applause, David, just a lot of applause. I learned that Joe Biden is basically seeing two people outside of his family. What is going on over there?
Look, I think that campaign had to ramp up in any event. And I'm honestly, Hugh, I will tell you this. I'm not making too much of it, and I'll tell you why. Opinions, partisanship right now is so fixed, and opinions of the president are so fixed. And when you look at what happened in 2016, where you had one candidate running a shoestring campaign and the other running a full-scale campaign, and it didn't go the way a lot of people thought it might. So there's going to become a point where people are going to have to be out and be a little bit more visible. I don't think now is that big of a deal.
I just am amazed that Joe is locked up in his basement and not out doing any kind of events with the press in a socially distanced fashion. But I recommend to you the Washington Post column. It's over on the landing page. Thank you, David M. Drucker. Coming right back, America. Larry Kudlow is in the show today. So is Jim Sciutto of CNN, Byron York, Tom Cotton, all ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for joining me this morning on May the 11th, 2020, in the year of the plague when, we're going to go over 100,000 dead within the end of the month. And I'm joined by Byron York of the Washington Examiner and Fox News. Byron, the president is tweeting up a storm about fake news this morning. And a lot of this, I think, goes back to the question that Philip Rucker asked yesterday. I want to play it and then get your reaction to it. Cut number 16, the president in the Rose Garden with the Washington Post, Philip Rucker.
Phil?
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it. But unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John,
so,
please.
Byron York, good morning. How are you, Byron?
Good morning, Hugh.
What is Obamagate?
Well, first of all, a political crime is not necessarily a crime that the Justice Department prosecutes, but Obamagate is a question, basically. What was President Obama's knowledge of? What was his participation in the dubious acts of the FBI, the Justice Department, the intelligence agencies in the Trump-Russia matter? Because I know that ever since Republicans first began discovering some of the funky things the intelligence agencies, the FBI, law enforcement were doing after, starting in the summer of 2016 to investigate the Donald Trump campaign. When they first started learning about that, their question was always, what did President Obama know about this? After all, he was the president up until January 2017. And they've never been able to really find out. And what's been interesting about some of the papers that were released as a result of the Justice Department moving to drop the charges against Michael Flynn is that we learned more about a thing like the January 5th, 2017 meeting. And we know very specifically that President Obama knew about the Michael Flynn wiretap, knew about the results of the wiretap, and now we'd like to know more.
I don't know if you've had a chance to read Exhibit 4 to that filing yet, the Sally Yates record of conversation with the special counsel, Byron. It is one of the most explosive. Yeah.
Yes,
it's
was.
Just riveting reading. And my definition of Obamagate is the intentional interference with the peaceful, seamless, cooperative transition of power between presidential administrations. It may not be criminal to mess around with that, but it's certainly destructive of the Republic's greatest political tradition. And what went on between that January 5th meeting in the Oval and Jim Comey setting up Mike Flynn, and it's clear Sally Yates is the boss. She outranks Brennan and Comey and everyone on the National Security Council. She outranks Clapper, and she doesn't know what's going on in January 5. And the president, according to her interview, this is Sally Yates, doesn't want to know more than he already knows. What do you call that, Byron? In my world, we call that a cutout.
Yes. Well, the big thing we learned, in that exhibit was that as far as the wiretap of Flynn was concerned, Sally Yates learned about it from the president himself, which is really astonishing. It was not that she learned that the president knew about it; she learned about it herself from that. Now, the papers seem to present, I'm not sure this is all totally correct, seem to present the FBI as the major rogue agency here. That if you look at what Mary McCord, who was the top FBI official, wrote the other day denouncing the Justice Department for dropping the charges, she basically said, well, at the FBI, we wanted to warn the White House about this conversation between Flynn and Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. We wanted to inform them of it and warn them about it. And it's the Justice Department, they wanted to do it. But the FBI decided to just go all rogue and go over there and question him on pain of perjury about it. What we really wanted to do was just give them a heads up about it. Now, if they had done that, we wouldn't have had a lot of this stuff that's happened. But instead, they went over, they questioned Flynn, and as you followed all this 302 stuff. The 302 stuff is unbelievably fishy. The tail of the 302 is unbelievably fishy. And even then, they decided not to do anything about it. James Comey tells Congress in March of 2017 that the agents didn't think Flynn lied, and Comey, did not expect any action to be taken as a result of this. The Flynn case is put up on the shelf. Then Mueller is appointed. There's a desire to pressure Trump in any way possible. The Flynn case is taken down off the shelf. He is pressured into pleading guilty, and hopefully they think he will spill the beans on the whole collusion episode. Didn't work.
Byron. The story, the purloined letter. That Sally Yates interview is so astonishing because they are agonizing. It's like it's a soap opera at the Department of Justice. Do we tell him? Do we not tell him? Do we tell him? Do we not tell him? Comey does not consult them. He works for them. He does not outrank the Attorney General, acting or otherwise, and he has no right to do this. They know she wants to tell the White House, so they lickety-split send over Strzok and somebody else to trap Flynn against the wishes of the Attorney General. It is astonishing. And what Yates does not say, other people were in that January 5 meeting, other national security aides besides Susan Rice. I'm guessing Ben Rhodes, but I don't know for sure. I think Durham is drilling down on this, Byron. This is what I think he's all about, is that January 5 through the Flynn interview. I think that's what we're coming down to in Obamagate, and I am going to be shocked if we are not shocked by what he finds.
Now, we should say there was one other person that we still haven't mentioned yet in the January 5 meeting, and that was Vice President Joe Biden.
Yes.
Who should definitely be asked about this, because the scenario in the meeting as portrayed in the Yates 302, the scenario is the intel chiefs have gone to the White House January 5 to brief him on the results of the intelligence community assessment of Russian meddling into the election. At the end of this, Obama dismisses everybody and says, you, James Comey, and you, Sally Yates, you stay. And also in the room are Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, and Vice President Joe Biden. And you're right, maybe some other national security people we don't know about. And that's when this conversation
and
occurs.
Brennan.
But
Joe
Biden is in the room.
Yeah, Brennan, Clapper, Biden, Rice, and others, plus Yates and Comey. And everyone gets ushered out except Yates and Comey.
Right. And Joe Biden is always in the room. And we know that, by the way.
Did Biden stick around with Yates and Comey? Did Biden stay there with Yates and Comey?
According to Susan Rice. Because you remember Susan Rice wrote the funky email on January 20th, Inauguration Day, a little after noon. She writes the email to herself, specifically about the January 5 meeting. And she says, President Obama made clear to everybody that he wanted this handled by the book. And she uses the phrase by the book twice, which is what raises eyebrows among Republicans, saying it's kind of a protest too much situation. What's
you
going
bet.
on
It's Wile
here?
E. Coyote taking a delivery from Acme Inc., right? It's just such a cartoon memo.
Yes, here are the books I ordered.
Yes. So, Byron, when Philip Rucker asked that, is that question in good faith? Everybody knows what Obamagate is. Everybody knows.
Everybody at least should know. But you have to remember, a lot of this stuff was uncovered by Republicans. Specifically, Devin Nunes was the leader in uncovering this stuff in 2017, 2018. And there was fierce resistance in some parts of the press. They tried to discount it, tried to undermine it, tried to argue that it was untrue or biased or whatever. You remember that? Remember the Nunes memo that revealed that Democrats in the Hillary Clinton campaign had paid for the dossier, and the FBI and a lot of their cheerleaders in the press absolutely condemned it.
Yep. There's a lot of summing up going on right now, but when we get from Durham, it may not be an indictment, but we're going to get an explanation, I hope, and I hope we get it by June, July, August, September. Byron York on Twitter, you've got to be following him, at Byron York. Follow me to the next segment on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. 50 years ago. I don't know why this song caught on, but it did. I found this, it's going to drive Adam crazy. I found this new Spotify 50 years ago music. Means I was 14, so of course it's hardwired into my head. That's how they program, all the oldie stations. Is they identify their demo. If it's 25 to 64, they play the playlist, and there's a band of stations that are targeted at people between 55 and 70, and they just play those songs. And it's the playlist of your youth, which is hardwired into your adolescence. And so I don't know why that song. I know the words of that song. I'm embarrassed. Not embarrassed to tell you about the pre-market report. Actually, it's the business story of the day report. I don't know what markets are going to do today. I know what they did yesterday. AndrewandTodd.com sponsor this segment, and they will help you refinance your home, and they will save you a lot of money right now because the 10-year Treasury is normal at 0.73%, the lowest rates ever. It's just the lowest rates ever. I've seen some rates under 3. I don't know. I think you must have to have a 900 credit score and be putting down 50% on your house. But there's some ridiculous rates out there. I want to especially say to a senior citizen who's worried that they don't have enough money because their 401 went down 25% in the market crash. I would like you to investigate a reverse mortgage and to do it with Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian only. Do not call up Joe, the reverse mortgage wizard down the street. Do not do that. Joe, the reverse mortgage wizard down the street is going to steal you blind. Call up Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, great men. I've known them for 20 plus years. They will spend the time it takes to explain it to you. They'll get equity out of your house. They'll give you a big pile of cash. They'll find you a financial advisor, and they will help you save that money and add to the comfort of your retirement, and you'll never have to make a mortgage payment again. And you will have to pay your taxes on your house, your homeowners association fee. But reverse mortgages are complicated, but they are legal and they are useful for some people who are stretched to the limit. And if you're a veteran, you want to get just a house at 0% down on these rates, now is the time to do it. AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. Light crude is up to $26 a barrel. This is very good for the markets. Natural gas is rising as well. In Germany, their index is up 0.5%. In England, it's up 1%. Yesterday, the Dow was off 100 points, but the NASDAQ was up 71. Amazon yesterday was up $30. As the world just turns to Amazon and everything, I expect it's going to have another. I'm not a prophet nor the son of the prophet. I just think that the V is coming. And when the V gets here, we'll talk to Larry Kudlow about the V next hour. Larry Kudlow, the president's foreign policy, economic policy advisor, is joining me, and we're going to talk about the V. AndrewandTodd.com. Let me talk to you about giving masks as well. You're gonna need masks. You're gonna need masks for a good year. Where do you get them from? I suggest givingmasks.com/Hugh. Why? Because they will not only give you the masks that are European certified, they're very good masks. They will work. I myself am buying Cleveland Browns masks and Cleveland Indians masks. Those are too expensive for most people. I'm a little bit crazy, so I'm just going to be out there because we're winning 2 rings this year. It's going to be a funky World Series, but it's still going to be a World Series, and the Indians are going to win it, and the Browns are going all the way. So I'm wearing Browns and Indians masks. But givingmask.com, if you just want to have a mask, go to givingmask.com/Hugh. And every box of masks you buy for yourself, they'll send one to the hospital I designate, in this case, Children's Hospital of Orange County, CHOC, which is the greatest hospital for kids in the world. There are others that are as equal as great, but I love CHOC. Brett Baer loves the one in D.C., and I trust Brett on that. But I know CHOC. CHOC's taken care of friends and family for years. They're my preferred hospital. Let me also remind you tomorrow, Wednesday, May 13th at 4 p.m. in the Pacific, 7 p.m. in the East. Not allowed to laugh. Free speech and the death of comedy. It's a Facebook live event hosted by our own Eric McTaxis. Adam Carolla will be there. Dennis Prager will be there. They're going to gag Dennis so the other people get to talk. I love Dennis. Not allowed to laugh. Free speech and the death of comedy. Tomorrow at 7 p.m., go to nosafespaces.com for more information. By the way, if you use the code SAVE25, you'll get 25% off. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. 33 minutes after the hour. In the year of the plague, 2020, it's May 11th, and the statistics are grim out there, but the world goes on, and eventually we're going to come to a reckoning with the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP of the PRC, as to what is their role. I'm going to be talking tomorrow with Richard Haass about that. Today, I'm pleased to welcome back Jim Sciutto, who you know from CNN, where he is the anchor of CNN Newsroom. He's their chief national security correspondent, a friend of mine. And Jim was last on the show to talk about his great book, The Shadow War, which dives deep into the PRC. Jim served there in Beijing as the what was your job, Jim? What do we call your job when you were in Beijing?
I was chief of staff to the ambassador.
Yeah, so you actually, and you speak Mandarin, don't you?
I do, although it's getting lousy the longer I'm out of that country. But
yeah,
I got
okay.
something.
You're still way ahead of the rest of it. Jim actually knows what he's talking about when we talk about the CCP of the PRC. So I had sent him a note a few weeks ago and said, come back to the show. He said, happy to. By the way, I've got a new book coming out, The Madman Theory, Trump Takes on the World. Of course, my ears perked up because the Madman Theory is, of course, linked to President Richard Nixon, whose foundation I chair and the library I run when we, the non-government part of it. And I want Jim to come out and talk about the Madman Theory because Nixon invented it, and I just totally diverted. We'll come back to the PRC, but what is the Madman Theory about? And if you wanted to arrive on time, you'd better order it now because Amazon's not exactly using the Pony Express right now.
Well, I mean, going back to Nixon, you know better than me that, the idea was, and President Nixon had Kissinger convey this to the Vietnamese, was that, listen, he was just mad enough to order a nuclear strike on North Vietnam during the war to leverage that unpredictability or willingness to go that far to the U.S. advantage. Now, it's not exactly the same with Trump, but there is an element of him, and I've spoken to folks across his administration, current and former, of keeping adversaries on edge to the advantage or to attempt to make that to the advantage of the U.S. So the idea is, where does that work? How has the president tried to use that, and how have allies, but also how have adversaries, but also allies responded to that?
Jim, you're onto something very important. I've only talked to the president a handful of times since he became the president, but I did talk to him a lot in the debates that CNN and Salem ran jointly, and I followed his foreign policy greatly. And of course, I spent hours every day from the October of 1978 through June of 1980 with former President Nixon, hours and hours and hours every day with him. So I know what the Madman Theory is. And while Richard Nixon is probably the most well-read president, I really do believe the most well-read president entering the office of any president, and President Trump is a developer who is not fond of reading deeply into Disraeli by William Blake, et cetera. Richard Nixon couldn't build an elevator shaft, and Donald Trump has a different skill set. But they both share a love of surprise and unpredictability. And that's what the Madman Theory is. I think Trump probably said 100 times, Jim, remember from the debates, I don't like to telegraph what I'm going to do, right?
Exactly. And listen, there are times when that, that catches your allies off guard as well, which can create its own issues. But Nixon tried it during Vietnam. The Trump approach to Russia or even a China in the midst of this, right? Because you see it. And I spoke with Peter Navarro, for instance, for the book. China, not knowing how far the president is willing to go, has at times put the U.S. in a stronger position relative to China in those negotiations. And then the president being willing to pull back, right, make a concession after pushing the limit. So some of it is the art of the deal. And that phrase, the art of the deal, came up frequently in interviews.
Yeah, Jim Sciutto, I know I've known Peter for 30 years. One of the unpredictable thing about Trump is who he brings into his White House court. Peter Navarro is a hardcore Democrat, like he's a left-winger, one of the more charming and occasionally abrasive guys in the White House. But O'Brien is my former law partner. I've known Mike Pompeo forever. This is a very experienced team. This is a group of people that know what they're doing, but I doubt that any of them on a daily basis knows where the boss is going to go. Do you agree with me on that?
I do, and the reason I can say that with confidence is that they've told me that flat out, and it's in the book. And listen, to be fair, that creates its own issues, right? If your team, if the national security operation, if the agencies, if the Department of Defense and Department of State don't know what the next move is, it's interesting. One of the folks I interviewed for the book said that our adversaries also know that the organs of the U.S. government don't always know what the next move is, and then they seek to take advantage of that. So, listen, history is going to be a judge of where it put the U.S. in a stronger position and where it put it in a weaker position. What I try to do in the book is lay it out from folks on the inside to see how it played out with regards to China, but also North Korea, Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, etc., and even the coronavirus to some degree.
I'm telling people, though, and I wonder if you agree, it takes two terms to make this work. Nixon's was cut short. He was on the brink of rearranging the world. To a certain extent, he did rearrange the world, but he also regretted that he may have launched a Frankenstein's monster in the CCP. But he took down the Soviet Union eventually by playing tripartite superpower diplomacy. But you can't do it in one term. It's not enough time. If Trump isn't reelected, this will be a giant swing and a miss because you can't go back to the Obama era, or you just will lose the advantage of unpredictability. And so I know you're not in the business of making political predictions. That's just my take on it. Let's talk about the CCP, Jim, since you know that. Any idea, in your view, if President Xi faces a Khrushchev moment inside? General Secretary Khrushchev, head of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union from 58 to 64, wakes up one day, and Brezhnev and the gang say, sorry, you're out. They don't kill him. He's just out because he screwed everything up with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Does Xi face anything like that?
He faces a danger, and I think you can see his own and the CCP's own concern about that danger in their response to this. I often say that China doesn't have, it certainly doesn't have democracy, but it does have domestic politics, right? People care when their government screws up. And that's why early on, listen, it's a fact that China covered up the initial outbreak of this. They silenced local officials, they silenced doctors who were giving early warnings, and crucially, they silenced members of the public. They mined social media there to look for any comments and shut people down as they express concern and criticism of the government. So that reaction shows you that they're concerned about it. Now, the trouble is China's pretty darn good at that, right? I mean, they're good at silencing dissent and keeping an eye on things, and they leverage technology to do that. But I mean, the risk for them is one, the health factor here. Many people dead, and more people dead than China has acknowledged. But two, the economic factor, because the CCP does not survive if it doesn't. Its power doesn't survive if it doesn't keep that promise to make people wealthier over time. And they were able to keep that promise for many years as the economy grew. But there are cracks in that foundation right now, right? We already saw that with huge debt levels in the country. But as the economy shuts down, people don't make as much money, and they're not constantly getting richer. Then they look at the government and say, "Hey, what's in it for me?"
Now, Jim, I got to ask, when you mentioned in an aside that we don't really know what the numbers are, I am always aghast when people say the United States leads the world in deaths and cases. We have no idea what's going on in the PRC. They just lie. Is that not true? And are we not better off saying, with every time we state what the United Kingdom or any free country has, like the United States, that we have no way of comparing it to Iran, China, and other dictatorships?
Agreed. No, listen, anytime I mention those numbers on the air, I make an effort every time the Chinese death toll to say that, to take this with a grain of salt because we know how the Chinese government operates. And you can say that too. I mean, I said that for years about Chinese economic figures, right?
Yep.
We always take them at face value, but you're like, wait a second. Even when I was in China, you'd speak to Chinese economists and businessmen, and they would say, I don't buy those numbers, right? They don't look at them because it's the nature of the operation. So you can reasonably say that actually far more than reasonably say that the official figures understate the actual toll in China.
Now, tomorrow I've got Richard Haas on, and I think we're going to disagree because Richard argues that the China can't be blamed for America not having PPE, et cetera. I think China can be blamed for everything because I'm a lawyer. I know what proximate cause is. I know what the chain of causation is, and I taught torts, not very well, but I taught it, and I know if China doesn't cover this up in October, none of this happens, Jim Sciutto. Have they come to grips with that publicly anywhere?
Well, listen, I mean, is it if China had led on earlier the true extent of this, would this have stopped the pandemic in its tracks? I'm not an epidemiologist, but we speak to a lot of them on the air, and the nature of this virus is quite aggressive. That there's a lot of evidence it would have gotten out anyway. Would it have given other countries, the U.S. included, more lead time to respond to it? Absolutely, that's no question. So. You know, it can't. The trouble with pandemics, right, is that they're good, right? They're good at spreading, and a novel coronavirus is good at spreading, and we've seen that across the board, even as countries have responded aggressively to it. So again, I'm not the epidemiologist, but I ask this question on the air often, and their answer will be, listen. It hurt the initial response, but it's certainly not the only reason this thing is spreading.
You know, it's going to be hard for me to find a lawyer who knows anything about Paul's graph, which is the key torts case, who doesn't say everything goes back to China. Last question, Jim, and not a gotcha question. I'm just curious. You're busy. Have you had a chance yet to read the Sally Yates Exhibit 4 declaration to the Department of Justice motion to dismiss against Flynn, her interview with the special counsel's office?
I have not read it in the last week. I've read other accounts. I've read the documents that Barr and his assistant relied on in reversing the Flynn decision, and I've read Mary McCord's dispute as to how that was characterized. I have interviewed Sally Yates before, and if you recommend me diving into it, I'll dive into it.
Oh my gosh, this exhibit is the key to Obamagate. It is everything. And I'm not going to take seriously, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask your opinion about Obamagate. That's a gotcha question. I don't do that. But I will tell you, the Sally Yates discussion with the special counsel reveals that although she outranks Brennan, Comey, Clapper, Susan Rice, everybody except the president and the vice president, she outranks them all. They kept her in the dark. She didn't know what was going on, and I am astonished that people don't know this. Jim, last question. Are you well? Everybody in Team Sciutto well?
Family safe, and that's the best thing we can have. Best thing we can have in this environment.
Good news.
Same for you as well?
Yes, everyone's fine, although I'm a little bit crazy. I mean, I'm now taken to watching one Seinfeld episode a day just to stay happy. That's my cure.
I need, if you please send streaming ideas, because I'll tell you what I watched last night, which I watched the original Midway movie.
Oh, good movie.
You got to dive back into old movies, I think.
Yeah, but I also tell you, Fauda and Laburo, for someone like you, you'll love. One is Israeli and one is French, Fauda and Laburo, but a little Seinfeld goes a long way. Thank you, Jim Sciutto. The new book is The Madman Theory. Order it now, and it might get to you by August when it comes out. Let me tell you as well, time to, what did I do with my ReliefFactor.com bag? There it is. There it is. Tens of thousands of you take this every day, and like me, you're out there every day with your mask on, going miles after mile after mile. And I did 8 yesterday because I got on the phone with Harry, who runs the Washington Speakers Bureau, and I ended up lost. I called my son. I said, I have no idea where I am. And because I'd been talking to Harry, I eventually got back. All you have to do is walk to the river and eventually get home. But ReliefFactor.com, it's not a scooter. It's the real deal. It'll help you. Go out and get it, $19.95. And don't forget honorboundcoffee.com. Thousands of you have signed up already. We need hundreds of thousands of you to get your coffee in a way that supports military families. Honorboundcoffee.com. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by United States Senator Tom Cotton from the great state of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator. I hope Team Cotton is well.
Good morning, Hugh. Good to be on with you.
I want to assure you that no funds of the Chinese Communist Party were used in the production of this program, which I think is increasingly going to be necessary in America.
Well, that's true, Hugh, but that's only because it's such a low-quality, low-value programming. I don't think they'd waste their money on it.
What is going on at the University of Arkansas? Your home state Razorbacks are on the take from the CCP.
Hugh, it's very troubling news that just announced yesterday. A University of Arkansas professor of electrical engineering has been charged with wire fraud, but it's clearly related to the Thousand Talents program of China, which is an espionage program the Chinese government uses to pay for American technology and expertise and trade secrets. This is very similar to the charges that Charles Lieber, the head of Harvard's chemistry department, faced in January. Judging by the complaint, this professor has been aiding the Chinese Communist Party in advanced technologies like semiconductors or heat and weather resistant packaging for electronics, fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells for vehicle controls, all the kind of cutting edge technology that China has made a priority to try to take from the United States and then leap ahead of us.
Buried at the bottom of the Times story, it says he worked on power grid security research.
Yeah, it's very, very worrisome, Hugh. But here's the real crime, Hugh. The act of taking this money for people like Simon Ong at the University of Arkansas or Charles Lieber at Harvard is not a crime. It is perfectly consistent with U.S. law to take money from Chinese Communist Party affiliated entities and then to aid them in the development of these technologies. That's why Simon Ong is charged with wire fraud. That's why Charles Lieber was charged with the kind of misrepresentation fraud on federal grants. I'm going to introduce legislation that would simply make the conduct crime, Hugh. We ought not to allow our very best scientists and researchers and professors, almost all of whom either at all times or at many times are conducting federally funded research from the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, the intelligence community, the National Science Foundation. We ought not to allow them to also be on retainer to Chinese Communist Party officials giving access to all of that technology which American taxpayers have been paying for.
100% agree. I just think we've got to decouple America's higher education. I am curious, Senator Cotton, if you agree that an amnesty might not be a good idea. If the Department of Justice were to say, if you're involved in taking money from the People's Republic of China, step forward right now, declare for us what the extent of the relationship is, and we will not prosecute you. Would you? Because I am more interested in finding the network than in prosecuting the dupes.
Hugh, that's a possibility. I wouldn't want to comment too extensively on it, though, because if something like that were done in part, you would expect it to be a classified matter because there's so much technology that has been pilfered from our universities and from our laboratories about which we don't know. If you read the complaint against Simon Ong from the University of Arkansas, you'll see that he kept the University of Arkansas in the dark about this, as Charles Lieber appears to have kept Harvard University in the dark. So they are in many ways victims, just like the taxpayer are.
Yeah, the new Alger hisses are not going to be at the State Department. They're in America's universities. Let me ask you, Senator Cotton, before we run out of time, I have read Sally Yates's statement to the Office of Special Counsel. It's Exhibit 4 in the documents dismissing the Michael Flynn prosecution. It's stunning. I mean, anyone who comments on Obamagate without reading this is just simply being stupid. Have you had a chance yet to read it?
I have, you, and I think Sally Yates, who again is no Trump supporter, no Republican, kind of indicts so many of her peers from the Obama administration, given the fact that Barack Obama knew about this call with Michael Flynn and the Russian ambassador before she did, and apparently may have been directing the FBI to continue this kind of activity. That's why, by all appearances, he kept Jim Comey and Sally Yates behind on the now infamous January 5th, 2017 meeting, because he knew that they would both still be in the government after the inauguration of Donald Trump.
Well, here's my question, though. The Attorney General or the acting attorney has to sign off on the FISA warrant that allows the Russian ambassador to be monitored. So I think Sally Yates had to sign off on that unless they didn't get a FISA warrant. I don't know how long she was acting AG for, but it expires usually in December. Have you looked at that timeline yet?
I don't know the exact timeline, Hugh, or when those might have expired. I do know that there's still more information to be disclosed. I think there may be more disclosures coming today, but we're finally seeing the unraveling of what could prove to be one of the biggest political scandals in American history, that the Obama administration intentionally abused FBI authority to interfere with the peaceful transition of power.
That's Obamagate. Is the undermining of America's greatest tradition as a republic is the peaceful, seamless, cooperative transition of power, and they tried to blow it up like a bridge in a bad war movie. Tom Cotton, always a pleasure to talk to you, Senator. But I assure you, the CCP has no money invested in the Hugh Hewitt show. I just got to make that assurance now that we read these stories about the University of Arkansas. I mean, if the Razorbacks are for sale. Oh, well, I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Larry Kudlow coming up. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Election Day in California's 25th Congressional District. Coming up later this hour, Larry Kudlow, the president's economic advisor, joins me from the White House. But I want to replay yesterday's interview with Mike Garcia, and you need to get out and vote for Mike Garcia if you're in the Simi Valley or anywhere close in the California 25th. If you've got a paper ballot at home, take it into the election district near you. Here is yesterday's conversation with Mike Garcia. I'm joined by Mike Garcia. Now, Mike Garcia is not a name you will know outside of California, but you will on Wednesday because he's going to be the next congressman from California's 25th Congressional District, which votes tomorrow in a special election to fill a vacancy. And I'm pleased to welcome Mike Garcia to the program right now. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's do the rundown first on the logistics because we got people who are awake in California and they will watch this on YouTube. The election is tomorrow, but a lot of people have ballots in their hand. What should they do with those ballots if they've got one in their hand?
Yeah, if they still have it in their hand and they haven't mailed it in, the best thing to do is actually to go to a live voting center. And tomorrow's the big day, but there's actually a few voting centers open today as well throughout the district, and you can get all those logistics on my website at electmikegarcia.com.
electmikegarcia.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at MikeGarcia2020. Tell us how the race stands, because this is a very important seat, and getting a Navy fighter pilot back into Congress would be a very good thing indeed.
Absolutely, I believe so as well, Hugh. So this is the notorious seat that Katie Hill resigned from back in November. So this is to fill the vacancy for the rest of this year. And then I've got to run again in November against the same Democrat opponent for the follow-on term of 2 years. So things are going very well. We've got about 120,000 ballots returned so far through the mail for the last 3 weeks of mail-in vote by mail, and it's looking very favorable to us right now. But as you know, this is California, and we've got to keep our foot on the pedal all the way through the finish line.
And Leader McCarthy has told me they also have to raise money from you. They're not going to stop raising money for you because the Democrats, when you win on Wednesday, they're just going to turn around and try and beat you fair and square or unfair and unsquare come the fall. It's really the same campaign, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it's a marathon of marathons here. I've been running for over a year already, so we've got to get in office tomorrow and then perform, execute, and keep doing what we're doing as a team. I've got a magnificent team, but we've got obviously the support of not only Leader McCarthy now, but also the president, several dozen members, and what I'm proud of most is the 500-600 volunteers we have here in our district that have been really doing God's work and pulling more weight than anyone, and it's been very humbling to watch, but it's truly a grassroots campaign that's paying off here for us.
Now, you got some Steelers fans who live in the 25th. They may not know they have an election tomorrow. Will you tell them where the 25th is so that they have same-day registration? They can go in tomorrow and vote, correct?
Correct, yep. You can show up. It's northern L.A. County, so it's Simi Valley, Porter Ranch, the Santa Clarita Valley, and the Antelope Valley up north there with Acton and Agua Dulce as well in the mix. So pretty good size geography there. So make sure that you either are in or just out of it if you can. But as you said, you can show up same-day registration and have your vote counted tomorrow.
This is Buck McKeon's old seat, and he was a great voice for America's defense. That's why I want an Annapolis grad and a fighter pilot, Mike Garcia, to come back and join Gallagher, who's a Marine, and Cotton, who's an Army guy, and we'll get some other Navy people. But tell people a little bit about yourself. You're a fighter pilot. You flew 30 combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom over Iraq. But, I mean, you've been flying. I don't know how many times you took off. How many traps you got, Mike Garcia?
I probably have between 400 and 500 total traps or landings on an aircraft carrier. So, and it never gets old. It never got you never get complacent around the boat, obviously. So, but I got to serve for about 15 years there, Annapolis grad, also a Georgetown master's degree from Georgetown in National Security Studies. For the last 11 years since getting out of the Navy, I've been in the aerospace business here, which in our district is a massive industry. It's really the backbone of our economy. So it's been a fantastic experience there, being in a leadership position there in aerospace. But Yeah, nothing like flying, an $80 million aircraft and the responsibilities that come with that, and helping our troops on the ground during Operation Iraqi Freedom was a real honor.
I love the picture of you and your wife and your two boys. And obviously, you got to go back there and fight for them. The country's in a pretty bad place right now because of the Chinese Communist Party. And it takes some clarity. How much has that issue driven the campaign, Mike Garcia, in California's 25th?
You know what? A pretty significant piece. From because of where I come from and what I have access to and what I see now in the aerospace business, I've been pretty emphatic about the fact that, for the last 2 years, really, that China isn't a near peer threat. It is a peer threat in several domains, and whether it's cybersecurity, space, or otherwise, and now this not only the virus but also our dependency on them for pharmaceuticals and food and supplies. It's a real threat. We got to take it seriously, and this is a manifestation of a relative weakness to China as a result of the virus. But we've got to get to the bottom of it. We've had to investigate and figure out how we can insulate ourselves from this Chinese threat. It's a real problem.
Now, we also know California is on the ropes, and the recovery there is going to depend upon companies like your old company and basically every small business up there in Simi Valley. I just know the Valley very well. The headquarters of Salem Broadcasting, I think, is in your district. They're going to need to be deregulated, not regulated. I like Gavin Newsom on TV, but honestly, that state's been badly run for 30 years. I don't know how they get out of this hole, Mike Garcia.
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of leadership in Sacramento, unfortunately, not a lot of folks who have had the business background and understand what's going on the ground here. Our district was especially hard hit with large amusement parks, but also Princess Cruises is headquartered here as well. So we have one of the higher unemployment rates in our district right now. We really do need to get the lights turned back on in a safe fashion, obviously still keeping the infection rates down, but also getting back to work and looking at the unemployment line as much. So, yes, we're subjected to what Gavin Newsom's going to be doing here, but he had so many levers in front of him that he should have thrown right away. I mean, there's tax relief bills that should have been initiated. There's a bill called AB 5, which is killing independent contractors, and that was a problem before COVID-19 that should have just been undone or hit paused on. And my opponent, she's been a supporter of Gavin Newsom and all these red tapes and higher tax bills that are really killing small businesses. So.
AB 5 is a nightmare, which is a story for another day. It really is destroying lives. But let me ask again, how do you campaign for Congress when you can't really knock on doors? You got 500 volunteers. What do they do?
Yeah, and we actually have now nationwide several thousand who are just making phone calls at this point for us. And literally being the squeaky wheel and calling until we have folks' votes counted and we take them off our list. So telling friends, family, and neighbors, we've also been doing virtual town halls where we're getting anywhere from 1,500 or 3,000 people on these town halls. They call in, they listen, and I've done probably close to 200 Zoom events in the last 7 to 8 weeks. So it's a whole new world, but we've evolved, and my team, is superior in all ways, not just the volunteers, but also my staff and my campaign. So we've been able to evolve quicker, and I think we're going to be more effective in the end because of that.
Well, we're going to replay this tomorrow morning to remind people who are going to work. I'm reminding them right now that if they've got a ballot at home, just take it to your local polling place. Don't put it in the mail. I just don't trust these people out there. Show up and sign and vote for Mike Garcia tomorrow in California's 25th. Mike Garcia, thanks for all your time serving the country. Good luck tomorrow morning.
Thanks, Hugh. And if I could just remind folks, our website's electmikegarcia.com, and thanks for all the support. Hopefully Wednesday morning we're going to wake up with some great news. Thanks for the support, Hugh.
You bet. So that's today, all right? So you Steelers fans, go vote today. And call everyone you know near Simi Valley, even if they're not in the district. Talking to you, Russ Shubin, Russ Hout, all you people, get to the polls. President Trump has been tweeting. Lots of tweets. Got to move fast here. Asian Americans are very angry at what China has done to our country, writes the president, and the world. Chinese Americans are the most angry of all. I don't blame them. The 96% approval rating in the Republican Party, all caps. Thank you. We will win against a tired, exhausted man, sleepy Joe Biden in November. Then transition to greatness. Then the American people are warriors. Then our testing is the best in the world by far. Numbers are coming down in most parts of the country, which wants to open, get going again, and it's happening safely. Then so interesting to see all of these people I beat so badly. Pundits and consultants that never had a chance telling me how to run for office. That's so true. Many are Republicans who should love our 280 new judges, rebuilt military, 2A, great VA, low taxes, etc. Just don't like that I beat them. And then remember this, every governor who has sky-high approval on their handling, I'm happy for them, could in no way have gotten those numbers or had that success without me and the federal government. He's right. And then Obamagate. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I do not know why Captain Mark wanted this played. Mark Vandroff, just big Bobby Sherman fan. I don't get it. But I try and keep our nation's patriots happy. And if Mark Vandroff wants Bobby Sherman, I play Bobby Sherman. Welcome back. It's time to bring you up to speed on the business story of the day. Americans are saving at an extraordinary rate. The story brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. And that's why I think andrewandtodd.com are overwhelmed. I mean, they're processing everyone who calls, 888-1172 at Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian have their own website set up to handle you specifically. Andrew and Todd, 2 Ds for you Steelers fans, andrewandtodd.com. Answer a couple of questions. They'll tell you whether or not to refinance, whether or not to buy a house, how much of a house you can afford, whether you need a reverse mortgage if you're a senior. You got to be 62, I think, to qualify for that. If you're a veteran, 0% down. They will help you save money. They're kind of financial counselors right now in this period of crisis. andrewandtodd.com. And they are the big story today. Americans create economic threat with their own savings. Americans are saving more money than ever because they're afraid. They're not spending like they normally do, and I get it. Toyota has gone through, there's a story out of the Financial Times this morning that Toyota warns of profits collapse as pandemic hits vehicle sales, which means you probably can get a pretty good deal on a Toyota right now. Public pension fund losses set record in first quarter. I mean, it's been a fiasco. So if you need to get money out of your house or you need to save money, do it with andrewandtodd.com, 888-1172. England and Germany are both having green days. I don't know what the market's going to do today. I'm not a prophet nor the son of the prophet. I know, though, if you need money or you want to save money, andrewandtodd.com. Now, I want to thank everyone who has been very generous. We have sent dozens of at-risk kids special Angel Tree care packages already. They're going to get one. We will send a few to camp if the camp's open. It costs $200 to do one or the other. We'd rather send them to camp, but we're not sure which camps are going to be open. We're definitely, if they can't go to camp, we're going to send them the summer care package, the box of blessings. Men and women just like you have gone to HughHewitt.com and clicked on the Angel Tree banner. When you do that, you not only bless the child of a prisoner, someone mom or dad is in jail, with much-needed grocery gift cards, age-appropriate Bible, sports equipment, and more. But as Gary Eberhardt, who works with prisoners' kids in California, tells us, the most important gift you give these kids is hope.
Don't we all know that if we don't have hope, we have nothing? And these kids need to have that hope. And that's why these programs all over are so important, that people support them. The big figure they always throw out, that 70% of these kids will become incarcerated when they're adults. And I think it's important on us to look at that and say, can we break that cycle?
Now, I know my audience, all right? And listeners like you, I know you're sheltering at home. I know you're worried about money. I just gave you that story. But the answer is, can you break the cycle? The answer is yes, and many of you have already stepped forward. Thank you. Some people have not been slammed by this like other people. I'm working, and I'm glad I'm working. I'm very grateful for my job. I'm very grateful for Salem. I just signed an 8-year contract. I'm going to be doing this forever. And I hope, and thank God for that. But I want to tell you, these kids need your help. And the economy will come back. We're going to talk to Larry Kudlow after the break about the V that's coming. I think it's actually begun on the stock market already as I look at stocks like Amazon, up $30 yesterday, and Netflix and stuff. I mean, Costco, everything's changing. But we'll all get back. We're not going to stop buying cars. We're going to get the therapeutics we need. We're coming back. We'll talk to Larry Kudlow about it. But help the kids, the prisoners, get through it, please. Angel Tree banner is at HughHewitt.com. Or you can call 888-206-2764. If you're old-fashioned, just call 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. Coming right back with Larry, old friend, Larry Kudlow, next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-1172.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, inside the Beltway, 33 minutes after the hour, joined now by Assistant to the President, Larry Kudlow. For those of you who've been listening to the show for 20 years, for many years, Larry would do a segment a week with me. Then he started his own radio show. Then he started his own TV show. Hardest working man in broadcast. And then he goes to work in the White House. You've always been a grinder, Larry Kudlow. Thank you for joining us. How's your health? How's the Kudlow clan health?
Judy and I are fine. Thank you. God bless so far. Testing negative every day and praying that it will remain so. I go to work in the morning and come home at night. It's a very exciting life.
Larry, for the benefit of our audience, you are a grinder. How hard comparatively are you working now compared to how you've always worked? I mean, what's the atmosphere in terms of just sheer effort at the White House?
Well, everybody's working very hard. It's probably the toughest assignment I've ever had. I down through the years, Hugh. I mean, I'm almost as old as you are. I think if that's possible. I have to get a tally on that. But I've worked at the Federal Reserve. I've worked on Wall Street. I worked for Ronald Reagan and OMB. I worked as a broadcaster for about 20 years, as you noted. Now I'm back in the White House 40 years later. It's a tough assignment, very tough. But, I must say, first of all, it's an honor to give service, and it's an honor to work for President Trump. It's been a tremendous experience. Of course, the pandemic, the virus, makes everything much harder. But I don't want to special single out because I think throughout America, there's tremendous hardship and some heartbreak and a lot of anxiety. And I think this is just a hard period for all Americans. And I think I'm the eternal optimist. It's a great country. We have a way of rising up. Folks in America have a way of rising up and conquering problems seemingly insurmountable. I think the same is going to happen with this. That's my take.
Larry Kudlow, a few lifetimes ago, you and Arthur Brooks sat down at a National Review Summit, and it was one of the more inspiring conversations I've ever heard. And you both are men of deep faith. There is so much suffering in the world right now, and in the United States. You just referenced it. Is it testing your faith in any way?
No. In fact, I'm not sure I could do all this without faith. So I'm as committed to faith as possible. I'm a Catholic convert over 25 years ago. It sustains me. And actually, in my little church in Connecticut, a couple of guys have put the Sunday Mass, including the Easter Mass, online and YouTube. And so I watch that every Sunday, and that helps. And there's some wonderful people in the White House, in the West Wing, who are dear friends of mine, who are people of strong faith, and we talk about that a lot. So, no, it's, look, the Lord acts in strange ways, but I think he also gives us great strength. I think Jesus gives us great strength, and I partake of that strength really on a daily basis, So this has been
Larry, you raised in my mind an interesting question. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterians, meaning we support churches on both sides. There's one river, there are two banks. But a lot of churches are just crushed. You know this. Yeah. They're just crushed. What can the president's team do for the not-for-profit sector and the religious sector? Because the money's gone.
Well, it's a great point. And the administration in its policies have made allowances for assistance programs, and actually we're still looking for more. But I know that the payroll purchasing protection program was amended to permit dioceses and archdioceses where a lot of the schools have been closing because the daily offerings and the Sunday offerings, shut down because the church shut down. But we've made a lot of allowances so they can get some money, and we're looking for even more. I've worked with my longtime friend, dear heart, Kellyanne Conway on this. Steve Mnuchin's been very helpful. So has our new chief, Mark Meadows.
That is terrific news. I also have talked to 3 college presidents, former or present, And American higher education is on a cliff, Larry Kudlow. I'm sure you folks know about that. It operates on tuition, and they always are forward-looking. What do you think it's going to look like in American higher education in 2 months?
Well, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think the key point here, as in so many other cases, Hugh, is to reopen the economy. We've got to do it safely. We've got to abide by the data and the testing results and so forth. But I just hope, really, and pray that, like everything else, businesses across America, you can't have a good job without a good business. And with respect to churches and any religious forums, let's get this thing reopened. Again, it must be done safely. No question about that. But let's not stall it. Let's get it done as soon as we possibly can. So, in the case of schooling, certainly the fall semester, I have very high hopes. Our national numbers are seeing a flattening in the infection rates and the mortality rates, and we're getting the job done on testing and PPE and other key areas, contact tracing. So I just am optimistic that the economy transitions to an opening in May and June, and that will leave everybody in much better shape for a better economy this summer, and also to spill over into church openings and religious openings everywhere.
Now, Larry Kudlow, one of the things that's obvious to me, and I drive the data every day. I'm deep into it. What else am I going to do? I'm in my studio and I'm working. And I'm looking at the fact that clearly people under 45, with a few exceptions, one came up yesterday when John Roberts brought up the 85 cases, only 85, but it's still troubling, of children who've got the Kawasaki-like syndrome. But mostly it's a above 50, really above 65 problem, really above 70 problem. It is not unconstitutional to have age discrimination. It is illegal under the Age Discrimination and Employment Act to discriminate against seniors. But what about running airplane flights for just people under 45? What about opening restaurants for just people under 30 as a phase sort of thing? Is that kicking around the White House to take advantage of the fact that this virus does not hit younger people the same way it hits people like you and me who've got 6 decades or more?
Well, I haven't heard anything quite so specific delineating the age groups. It is one of the reasons I worry about you. Here you are working every day, my God. But that's a wonderful thing. I think we've issued guidelines on this that seniors should be very careful and perhaps, I say perhaps, stay in more than might normally be the case until we have greater confidence in the whole story. But again, I don't want to go too far on that because there are a lot of seniors that are working and that are actually looking for work. There was an article recently about that. I don't want to prejudice against them. If you don't feel good or you have some chronic pre-existing condition, that's different. Stay in, and maybe until the bitter end. But otherwise, I mean, look, I'm still standing. I'm blessed. I'm working. If I didn't feel well, I wouldn't go in naturally. I'd self-quarantine, but I feel fine, so I'm working. And
you and me both.
That's the general rule.
Yeah, I'm out doing 50 miles a week in walking and running, and I think it really depends. But I would love to see if we would open up airplanes and just say it's limited to 50 and under or 40 and under, they'd fill up because people would fly if they weren't afraid of the virus. Let me talk to you a little bit about the infrastructure plan, Larry Kudlow. I love infrastructure. I hate when it's done by the states or the federal government. I love giving money to counties because counties know what they need. As you talk about infrastructure funding, are you talking about making sure it gets down to the level where they actually know which bridge needs to be fixed and not giving it to the state governments to blow on pension plans, et cetera?
Well, we've looked at this. President also likes infrastructure, he said many, many times. And we want to have smart infrastructure, which probably does mean getting it down as far as we can into the local level. But we'd like smart infrastructure. We'd like more rapid infrastructure. And we've passed several executive orders. We've penned several executive orders for much faster permitting, particularly with respect to environmental regulations, where a lot of the locals stopped infrastructure because of ideological problems, all the green stuff. But we will try to be as smart as we can if we go forward with an infrastructure bill. There's a good bill from Senator Barrasso, Lane Chow at Transportation, my own team at NEC, and others have been working on making that bill better. There's some pretty reasonable Democrats, in my view, on the House side who we think we could work with on an infrastructure package. So we'll see how that works out in the next round of discussion.
All right, two more questions, Larry Kudlow. Liability protection. I am a lawyer. I admit to it. If we allow the plaintiff's bar to pick over the bones of business, we will never reopen this country. In my view, we have to either bar it, any COVID-related claim, or at a minimum preempt it by a federal standard that is reckless disregard for public health standards, and remove it to a single federal district like copyright, like royalties for the radio business. There's only one court you can go to. Is the Economic Council focused, like Mitch McConnell, on limiting liability for businesses?
Yes, absolutely. And you can hear the presidents talk about it almost daily on restrictions, on liability restrictions or shields or safeguards. This has got to be an integral part of any new package that may emerge in the next month or two. Got to be, for all these reasons. I mean, look, you restaurants being the obvious one, but it's not only restaurants. It's it could be hair cutters or small stores, things of that sort. If they know they're going to be sued and hauled off to court, and they're not going to open. They don't, and if they do open and get sued, they don't have the money to go to court and so forth. So this is something we have got to pay enormous attention to. This has to be part of any new package. The president said that many times. You're right. Mitch McConnell has been a great leader. Going back many weeks, I started talking about it publicly too. So this is very, very high on our list.
Would you say it's non-negotiable?
I wouldn't want to say anything's non-negotiable, but I think this one's pretty close to non-negotiable and may well be non-negotiable. It's just so important, particularly when you have rapid spreads. I mean, you don't know, these infections, you can get them any place. And perhaps that distinguishes COVID-19 from other virus problems. You don't know. Now, one key part here is obviously, and just for folks who are listening, gross negligence is punishable. Okay.
Yep.
You already have a lot of laws on the books with that. Okay, that's a separate matter. But if the restaurant or the bookstore or the hair cuttery is doing things right and following federal and local guidelines, then they should be safeguarded from any claims because it's so hard to trace these things.
Yeah, foreseeability is. Yeah, the tort law is obvious here, and you're on to it. So, Larry, I don't want to abuse your time. Last question. The president often stressed that public health means economic health, that people cannot survive depression, addiction, idleness. Do you think the media is just not getting this, or are they purposely ignoring this messaging? Because I hear the same question every night in the briefing, and they do not seem to get that economic health is public health.
Yeah, well, of course, I agree with you. Some are, in the media, let's just say some are better than others. Others are worse than others. So I'll leave it at that. But, it can't be viewed, Hugh, as either or. I mean, public safety goes hand in hand with economic growth.
Yep.
So I believe we will do both. I think the president has been right to adopt the mitigation measures he had. I think the shutdowns did help bring the virus to heel. I think we're coming down the home stretch on this, and I think we're going to see big reopening. And frankly, Hugh, I think the second half of this year, you're going to see much stronger growth. I'm very much in the V-shaped recovery camp as businesses open. I think 2021 could be a very, very good year for the economy. And I think you'll see the president in any negotiations with Congress insist on measures that will spur growth incentives. You know, we've gone through the rescue phase. We did what we had to do, and we put, you know, with the Federal Reserve and the Congress and the White House, we probably put in over $9 trillion of assistance paid out to roughly 175 million people to try to keep the ship afloat. Now it's time to turn back to tax cuts and regulatory relief and things of that sort, which made this economy so strong in recent years, including the first couple of months of this year. If we go back to economic growth incentives, we can have a spectacular second half and next year, 2021.
Amen. If we go back, roll back regulatory relief, we'll kill this economy, Larry Kudlow. You're an economic historian. You know what happened in the Great Depression. If we go the big government route, we'll kill the recovery.
Yes, well, that's quite right. Now, I don't want to adopt Depression policies, and this is not like the Depression because, you know, this shutdown of the economy was not a function of bad policies. It was
Correct.
a function of this supernatural event. So it's different than that. But your point is still well taken. In order to get a booster rocket, you know, the president has rebuilt this economy once with good free market, supply side, incentive-oriented policies. And he aims to reopen it and rebuild it a second time. And I think you'll see those results within a few months.
Larry Kudlow, always great to talk to you. Stay healthy, my friend, and come back early and often. Always encouraging to talk to you.
Thanks, you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Here is the conclusion of my conversation with the Assistant to the President on the Chairman of the Economic Council in the White House, Larry Kudlow. Would you say it's non-negotiable?
I wouldn't want to say anything's non-negotiable, but I think this one's pretty close to non-negotiable and may well be non-negotiable. It's just so important, particularly when you have rapid spreads. I mean, you don't know. You know, these infections, you can get them any place. And perhaps that distinguishes COVID-19 from other virus problems. You don't know. Now, one key part here is obviously, and just for folks who are listening, gross negligence is punishable. Okay.
Yep.
You already have a lot of laws on the books with that. Okay, that's a separate matter. But if the restaurant or the bookstore or the haircuttery is doing things right and following federal and local guidelines, then they should be safeguarded from any claims because it's so hard to trace these things.
Yeah, the tort law is obvious here, and you're on to it. So, Larry, I don't want to abuse your time. Last question. The president often stressed that public health means economic health, that people cannot survive depression, addiction, idleness. Do you think the media is just not getting this, or are they purposely ignoring this messaging? Because I hear the same question every night in the briefing, and they do not seem to get that economic health is public health.
Yeah, well, of course, I agree with you. Some are, in the media. Let's just say some are better than others. Others are worse than others. So I'll leave it at that. But, it can't be viewed, Hugh, as either or. I mean, public safety goes hand in hand with economic growth.
Yep.
So I believe we will do both. I think the president has been right to adopt the mitigation measures he had. I think the shutdowns did help bring the virus to heel. I think we're coming down the home stretch on this, and I think we're going to see big reopening. And frankly, Hugh, I think the second half of this year, you're going to see much stronger growth. I'm very much in the V-shaped recovery camp as businesses open. I think 2021 could be a very, very good year for the economy. And I think you'll see the president in any negotiations with Congress insist on measures that will spur growth incentives. You know, we've gone through the rescue phase. We did what we had to do, and we put, you know, with the Federal Reserve and the Congress and the White House, we probably put in over $9 trillion of assistance paid out to roughly 175 million people to try to keep the ship afloat. Now it's time to turn back to tax cuts and regulatory relief and things of that sort, which made this economy so strong in recent years, including the first couple of months of this year. If we go back to economic growth incentives, we can have a spectacular second half and next year, 2021.
Amen. If we go back, roll back regulatory relief, we'll kill this economy, Larry Kudlow. You're an economic historian. You know what happened in the Great Depression. If we go the big government route, we'll kill the recovery.
Yes, well, that's quite right. Now, I don't want to adopt depression policies, and this is not like the Depression because, you know, this shutdown of the economy was not a function of bad policies. It was
Correct.
a function of this supernatural event. So it's different than that. But your point is still well taken. In order to get a booster rocket, you know, the president has rebuilt this economy once with good free market, supply side, incentive-oriented policies. And he aims to reopen it and rebuild it a second time. And I think you'll see those results within a few months.
Larry Kudlow, always great to talk to you. Stay healthy, my friend, and come back early and often. Always encouraging to talk to you.
Thanks, you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Now, I got to tell you that I want to make a prediction. Larry said supernatural event. What he meant was act of God, which is a technical legal term. And I guarantee you, someone is going to get the transcript of this, which Dwayne will post, and they're going to focus on the word supernatural. Why? Because the left wing isn't interested in everything else he said. They're going to seize on a word that they're going to make fun of and mock, because that's what the Beltway Manhattan media elite do. They don't read the Sally Yates, Obamagate, key conversation with the special counsel. They don't pay attention to the most obvious point about economic health being public health. They seize on what they can, and that's why my Washington Post column has got 3,000 comments, and I'm sure they're all favorable. It's because Trump derangement syndrome is everywhere. And I try not to spend a lot of time bashing the media, but honestly, if anyone, I'm just predicting, they won't be able to resist it. Some idiot's going to say, oh, Larry Kudlow said supernatural. He believes in demons or something. I just know what they're going to do. It's just because they're not your friends. And if you vote to return that gang to power, that gang that works hand in glove with the Beltway media, the old Ben Rhodes echo chamber, then this country is doomed to 10 years in the trough if you bring back Ben Rhodes in the echo chamber. That's your warning. Go read the Washington Post column. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Don't forget Angel Tree over at HughHewitt.com. We really need your help for the prisoners' children. Angel Tree banner at HughHewitt.com. Talk to you tomorrow.